Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jayakula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. So tonight I want to talk about walking on the earth while touching the sky. It's a way of talking about some of the main aspects of our practice and our view, which is that we have the understanding that although the nature of reality is continuity, there really are no objects or breaks between things. And we have that understanding as view, and then eventually we have that experience due to our practice. At the same time, we understand that the experience of there being a multiplicity, of there being objects, of there being separate people, of there being worlds, that experience is not degraded and not something that we are trying to transcend or avoid or push away. So when we are only having the experience of separation, when we don't have an experience or we don't yet have a consistent access to the experience of continuity, which is one of the meanings of the word Tantra is continuity. So when we don't have access to that fundamental nature, then we suffer from separation. But when we do have access to it, and when that is our new ground, and when we're immersed in it, then the multiplicity becomes enjoyable. We understand that it's a display of that base state, that it's an ornament, that it's magical. It has a magical quality. Now, here's where the misunderstanding happens. That experience of the multiplicity of duality, if you want to use the fancy philosophical term, is something that's very misunderstood. People have the idea sometimes, and even spiritual teachers have this idea, that when you are more realized, when you are more immersed in your real nature, that somehow you're going to become placid, unemotional, that you're no longer going to experience sadness, that you're no longer going to ever be upset about anything, that you're going to be just in some continual bubbly state of cheerfulness. The emotions that we experience are also part of the artistry or the glamour or the ornamentation of that we call duality. They're the flavor. We have texture, we have color, we have smell, we have speed, we have softness, we have liquidity. We have all of these different sensory experiences, and our emotions are part of that. So the difference between ordinary habitual emotional patterns experienced from the place where you really think you're a separate person and you have something to defend, the difference between that and the emotions as they're experienced by someone who's more realized is real. There is a difference. But this idea that someone who's more realized is going to appear to you to be completely unperturbable and always happy and always, some people, especially in Indian traditions where this idea of bliss can get very Hallmark cardy, if you guys even know what I mean. And sometimes I say stuff that I'm starting to date myself. Right? I don't know if anyone's going to understand me anymore. Do they even make Hallmark cards anymore? I don't know. Anyway.
It's very E-cardy.
Very E-cardy. Yeah. Thank you. Update me, please. So some enlightened person is going to be walking around like, all the time. Or that they're going to be like this all the time. Moving very slowly. That is part of a fixation. When people take on those kind of personas, spiritually speaking, they are still only partway there with some concept of what it is to be a person who has some accomplishment. I realized this long ago because I was fortunate enough to have encountered some teachers with some solid realization who were just the most expressive, changeable, no holds barred, I'll do whatever I want to be, thanks very much kind of people. And also having encountered the subtle but discernible difference between just a regular old emotional fixation or reactivity and this kind of more enlightened kind of emotion where things just come and go. Nothing really sticks around. And there's a sense of tasting it just like you would taste an ice cream, or the way that you would feel an interesting texture, or the way that you would encounter a beautiful color scheme, and that the emotions are also have that aesthetic experiential quality that is interesting. Even emotions like grief and fear and all the things that people think aren't enlightened. We're here, we're on earth, and being in a world is like being at a banquet. And that banquet includes all of our emotions also. At the same time, as we're in this world experiencing all these things that we do, we want to always try to be experiencing that continuity too, to the best of our ability. In other words, as they say, being in the state of our practice. Whatever we have realized, however far we have gone in our practice, whatever we feel is the most deeply we have come into contact with or experiencing our real nature, we try to always be in that. We try to remember that. So that's touching the sky, right? That sense of vastness and openness and infinite possibility. The sky is a living symbol of that. It's a living symbol of consciousness, the vastness of consciousness, or the mind of God. So we try to remember that and try to have this while we're still walking on the ground and experiencing all of this. So this also goes not just for people who are immersed in flowing presence, but it goes for anyone in any condition on the path, because we are, subject to a lot of fixations and distractions as we're going along in our day. And many times our emotions are very reactive and habitual, and they repeat themselves, and we feel threatened and we feel sad in a way that feels like it's just something very individual and closed in. But we are remembering, another way of talking about earth and sky is relative and absolute. So we are remembering that we have to deal with our relative experience. We have to deal with our limited view. We have to deal with our limited self-concept. We have to deal with our habitual emotions in some way or another. And this tradition has certain ways of working with those things, and other traditions have other ways. But we are never trying to run into the sky and avoid what's going on Earth. We are walking and we're trying to keep the bigger context, which is the view, in mind. And this is the kind of the thing that makes this kind of a direct realization practice a little more of a mind bender than some other kinds of paths that you might encounter. So in many other paths, you're being given earth teachings first. You're being given teachings about how to deal with your emotions and your mind, and you're talked about it as if you are actually an individual, and these are all relative teachings, and they can even get kind of psychologistic sometimes. In this tradition, you're given sky and earth teachings at the same time. In other words, absolute and relative teachings at the same time. This is a hallmark of direct realization traditions. Dzogchen, Chan Buddhism, Trika Shaivism. And it takes a little more effort. You have to be able to live with a certain amount of paradox. that your real nature is complete, open, infinite possibility, but you still have to deal with the fact that you hate doing laundry and you're leaving it for your roommate, and your roommate's pissed off at you and you keep doing that. So you feel you shouldn't have to do laundry for some unknown reason. So not only are we not denigrating Earth, we're not denigrating dualistic experience, but we are also not using sky to run away from Earth. We're not saying, oh, I don't have to deal with this because I'm sky. Okay? You are Earth and sky. You're both of those things. And the only thing that's going to change when you become more realized is that you're going to enjoy Earth more and feel more like sky. The other analogy, of course, that's used is waves in the ocean. If you're out surfing, you can't say, I am the whole ocean. The wave comes and knocks you over. Right? You have to pay attention to what's like happening in your neighborhood. Otherwise, you're going to get knocked over by a wave. At the same time, if you think you're on the surfboard and the only thing that exists is that tiny little piece of the wave that you're on, you're also going to get knocked over. So we're trying to hold it all in one experience. And this takes some work. I mean, it takes some letting go of some constraint of your imagination, constraint of your attachment to having only one way of looking at something, having the answer for everything. It's a little bit paradoxical at times. It also takes honesty, because there's a temptation to just try to assume a more absolute view when you haven't actually realized it, or try to talk yourself out of something using view teachings. There's a temptation there, right? There's also the temptation to just sort of have an intellectual understanding of these things and then not do the work of actually embodying them. So it is a very mature practice for that reason, but it also requires you to stretch your mind a bit and hold both of those things and understand that reality is producing both of those experiences at the same time. No matter how many times I give a teaching like this, and I have given teachings like this many, many times, or just answered questions that touch on these topics many, many times, I will always hear someone trying to talk someone out of a dark space by telling them, oh, but you're the infinite, or some silly thing like that. Or someone thinking like they have to give up earthly things in order to be spiritual, or the innumerable manifestations of partial view, or view that you've imported from some other tradition where earth is bad, sky is good, or whatever. So I thought today, just this phrase, standing on earth, touching the sky, came to me. And I think it's a good little phrase that you can keep in your pocket to remind you of the whole view and what we're doing. It's kind of concentrated in that one little phrase. So that's all I'm going to say today.